The morning sun pierced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Malik Rahim's penthouse apartment in Chicago's Gold Coast, casting long shadows across the immaculate hardwood floors. At 45, Malik had achieved everything society deemed worthy of success. CEO of Rahim International, a Fortune 500 company, with a net worth that made headlines in Forbes. Malik adjusted his custom-made brioni tie, the silk smooth against his calloused fingers. His reflection in the mirror showed a man others envied, tall, distinguished, with salt and pepper hair that added gravitas to his appearance. Yet his dark eyes, reminiscent of the deep wells in his childhood village in Lebanon, held a weariness that even his wealth couldn't mask. "Mr. Rahim, your Oito AM conference call with Dubai is ready," Sarah, his assistant of 7 years, announced through the intercom. Her voice held a hint of concern. She'd noticed the increasing frequency of Malik's late nights at the office. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll take it in the home office." His voice carried the slight remnants of his Middle Eastern accent, a reminder of roots he neither hid nor emphasized. The home office, like everything else in Malik's life, was meticulously organized. Awards lined the walls, each representing a milestone in his 20-year journey from immigrant to business titan. He settled into his leather chair, facing the Chicago skyline that had become both his kingdom and his prison. The call proceeded like clockwork: numbers, projections, strategies. Malik's mind, however, wandered to the dinner party he would host that evening. Another carefully orchestrated event where Chicago's elite would gather, drink expensive wine, and engage in conversations that never ventured beyond the surface. After the call, he walked through his apartment, footsteps echoing against marble floors. 5,000 square feet of luxury, and not a single family photo adorned the walls. His cleaning service maintained everything in perfect order, but the space felt more like a museum than a home. His phone buzzed, a message from his sister Amira in Lebanon. He hadn't seen her in 15 years, not since their parents' funeral. The message sat unread, like dozens before it. Malik had built his empire by looking forward, never back. The past held too many complications, too many reminders of what he'd sacrificed for success. As he prepared to leave for the office, Malik's eyes fell on a small, ornate box tucked away on a high shelf. It contained the only piece of his past he'd allowed himself to keep: his mother's prayer beads. For a moment, he was tempted to open it, to feel the smooth stones between his fingers as he had as a child. Instead, he turned away, locking the door on memories and unanswered messages alike. The Rahim International headquarters dominated a prime corner of downtown Chicago, its glass and steel structure a testament to Malik's vision and ambition. As he strode through the lobby, employees nodded respectfully, a mix of admiration and fear in their eyes. In the elevator, Malik found himself sharing the space with Victor Langley, a board member whose ambition rivaled Malik's own. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes as he spoke. "Malik, I trust you're prepared for the board meeting this afternoon. There are some concerns about the Jarkov deal." Malik's jaw tightened imperceptibly. The Jarkov deal, a $500 million contract that would cement Rahim International's dominance in the Eastern European market, had been his focus for months. "The deal will go through, Victor. I stake my reputation on it." Victor's smile widened, revealing too many teeth. "Of course, we all have faith in the great Malik Rahim." As the elevator doors opened, Malik felt a familiar pressure building behind his eyes. The migraines had been increasing in frequency lately, a fact his private physician attributed to stress. Malik attributed it to the price of success. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By mid-afternoon, Malik found himself staring out the window of his corner office, the Chicago skyline spread out before him. In the reflection, he caught sight of a photo on his desk, the only personal touch in the otherwise sterile space. It showed a much younger Malik, fresh off the plane from Lebanon, eyes bright with hope and ambition. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Sarah entered, her usually calm demeanor slightly ruffled. "Mr. Rahim, there's a situation in the lobby. A woman is insisting on seeing you. She says she's your niece." Malik froze, his mind racing. He had no niece, at least none that he knew of. Unless... "What's her name?" he asked, his voice unnaturally calm. "Sophia. Sophia Harrison." The name meant nothing to Malik, but a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach told him this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. "Have security escort her out," he said after a moment's hesitation. "I have a board meeting to prepare for." Sarah nodded, but as she turned to leave, she paused. "Sir, if I may, she seems quite distressed, and she has your eyes." Malik's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. "Thank you, Sarah. That will be all." As the door closed behind her, Malik's eyes fell on the unread message from Amira. With a sense of foreboding, he opened it. "Malik, I know you probably won't read this either, but I have to try. There are things you need to know about our family, about what happened after you left. Please, brother, it's time to break this silence. Sophia needs you." The words blurred as Malik stared at the screen. The carefully constructed walls of his life suddenly felt paper-thin, threatening to crumble under the weight of a past he'd spent decades outrunning. The intercom buzzed, Sarah's voice tentative. "Mr. Rahim, the board is waiting." Malik stood, straightening his tie with hands that weren't quite steady. He had an empire to protect, a deal to close. Whatever ghosts had emerged from his past would have to wait. As he walked toward the boardroom, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that the life he'd built was balanced on the edge of a precipice. The Jarkov deal, the board's scrutiny, this unexpected niece, it all swirled together, a perfect storm threatening to sweep away everything he'd worked for. Little did he know that the true tempest was yet to come, and it would begin with two small faces that would force him to confront everything he'd spent decades running from. The board meeting was a battleground, with Victor Langley leading the charge against Malik's handling of the Jarkov deal. Malik defended his strategy with the fierce determination that had become his trademark. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was fighting on two fronts, one in the boardroom, and one with the ghosts of his past that threatened to materialize in his lobby. As the meeting adjourned, Victor cornered Malik. "You seem distracted, Rahim. Is everything all right?" His tone was solicitous, but his eyes gleamed with predatory interest. "Everything's fine, Victor. Focus on your own performance, not mine." Malik brushed past him, his mind already racing ahead to the next crisis. Back in his office, Malik found himself staring at the phone, torn between curiosity and fear. Finally, he buzzed Sarah. The woman from earlier, Sophia. "Did she leave any contact information?" "Yes, sir. She left a card with an address and phone number." Malik jotted down the details, then paused. "Sarah, clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. And book me a table for dinner at Alinea, for one." That evening, as Chicago's lights flickered to life, Malik sat alone in the 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. The exquisite dishes paraded before him, each a work of art, but he barely tasted them. His mind was consumed with questions he'd long avoided. Who was Sophia? What had Amira been trying to tell him all these years? As he left the restaurant, the cool night air hit him like a slap. On impulse, he dismissed his waiting driver and decided to walk. The streets of Gold Coast were alive with evening crowds, but Malik felt oddly disconnected from the bustle around him. Lost in thought, he almost missed the small commotion near a convenience store. 2 children, a boy of about 10 and a girl perhaps 8, were arguing over something in their hands. Under normal circumstances, Malik wouldn't have given them a second glance, but something made him freeze mid-step. The boy's profile was eerily familiar. The same prominent nose that Malik saw in his own childhood photos. The same slight curl to the dark hair. The girl beside him had the distinctive Rahim family eyes, almond-shaped with long lashes. They were clearly siblings, their features animated in a way that sent a jolt of recognition through Malik's body. He blinked hard, convinced his mind was playing tricks on him. But when he looked again, the resemblance was undeniable. The children's clothes were worn and slightly too big for them, a sharp contrast to the affluent neighborhood they stood in. As if sensing his gaze, the girl looked up, meeting Malik's eyes. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then she tugged on her brother's sleeve, and they quickly disappeared around the corner, leaving Malik standing there, his heart racing with questions he hadn't allowed himself to ask in years. Without conscious decision, Malik found himself following their path, maintaining a discreet distance. The children moved with the practiced ease of those who knew the streets well, weaving through alleys and side streets. They clearly didn't belong in this neighborhood, yet they navigated it with familiar confidence. Malik watched them enter a small park, where they joined a group of other children. From his position near a coffee cart, he observed as they shared what appeared to be a single pastry between them. The sight stirred something in his chest, a memory of sharing bread with Amira in Lebanon, before everything changed. His phone buzzed insistently. Emails about the Jarkov deal, messages from board members. For the first time in years, Malik considered ignoring them all. The children's faces had awakened questions that had slept quietly beneath his success for decades. Who were they? Why did they look so much like his own family photos? As he finally turned away, heading back toward his penthouse, Malik's mind was already forming plans. He had resources, connections, ways to find information about anyone in the city. Yet something told him that uncovering the truth about these children would require more than just money and influence. It would require him to confront the past he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. The familiar weight of his expensive suit suddenly felt like armor, protecting him from emotions he'd rather not face. But the image of those children, their worn clothes, their familiar features, their shared pastry, had already begun to crack his carefully maintained facade. For the first time in 20 years, Malik Rahim was about to step off his prescribed path, driven by a mystery that seemed to echo with his own forgotten history. The next morning, Malik found himself standing outside a rundown apartment building in a part of Chicago he'd never visited. The address Sophia had left matched this location, a far cry from the gleaming towers of downtown where he usually conducted his business. As he hesitated at the entrance, an elderly woman emerged, struggling with a heavy bag of groceries. Without thinking, Malik stepped forward to help. "Thank you, young man," she said, her accent unmistakably Lebanese. "It's not often we see such well-dressed gentlemen in this neighborhood." Malik froze, the grocery bag suddenly heavy in his arms. "I'm looking for someone," he said, his own accent unconsciously thickening. "Sophia Harrison." The woman's eyes widened in recognition. "Ah, Sophia's uncle. We've been expecting you." She gestured for him to follow her inside. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and disinfectant. Malik followed the woman to a third-floor apartment, his heart pounding with each step. She knocked on a door, calling out in Arabic, "Sophia, Habibti, your uncle is here." The door opened, revealing a young woman whose features hit Malik like a physical blow. She had Amira's eyes, his mother's chin, a perfect blend of the family he'd left behind. "Uncle Malik," Sophia said, her voice a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I wasn't sure you'd come." For a moment, Malik couldn't speak. Then, falling back on years of business training, he extended his hand. "Sophia, I'm sorry for the confusion yesterday. Perhaps we could talk." Sophia nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was small but meticulously clean. Photos covered one wall, many showing a woman who must have been Amira, younger than Malik remembered her. In newer photos, two children smiled at the camera, the same children Malik had seen on the street. "Your children?" Malik asked, gesturing to the photos. "Yes," Sophia replied. "Maya and Liam. They're at school now." An awkward silence fell between them. Malik, usually so confident in any room, found himself at a loss for words. It was Sophia who finally broke the tension. "I know this must be a shock for you," she said. "Mom, Amira. She tried to tell you so many times. About me, about the kids. But when you never responded." She trailed off, years of hurt evident in her voice. Malik sank into a chair, the weight of his ignored past suddenly crushing. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I never read her messages. I thought I was protecting myself, my new life here. I never imagined that you had a whole family you were ignoring." Sophia's tone was bitter, but there was a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "Uncle Malik, I didn't come to you for money or to disrupt your life. But Maya and Liam, they're sick. We need help, and you're the only family we have left." The word sick hit Malik like a punch to the gut. What's wrong with them? He asked, dreading the answer. It's a genetic condition, Sophia explained. Rare, but treatable. The treatment is expensive, though, and with Mom gone. She gestured helplessly around the small apartment. Malik's mind raced. He had the resources to help, of course. But he also knew that writing a check wouldn't be enough. This wasn't a business problem he could solve with money and walk away from. This was family. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. It was Victor Langley. Malik, where the hell are you? The Zharkov representatives are here, and they're not happy about your absence. Malik looked at Sophia, saw the mixture of hope and resignation in her eyes. In that moment, he made a decision that would change the course of his carefully constructed life. I'm dealing with a family emergency, Victor, he said, his voice firm. Handle the meeting. I trust you can manage without me for one day. As he ended the call, ignoring Victor's sputtering protests, Malik turned back to Sophia. Tell me everything, he said. From the beginning. I want to know about Amira, about you, about the children. It's time I started listening. As Sophia began to speak, Malik felt the foundations of his world shift. The empire he'd built. The walls he'd erected around his heart. None of it seemed to matter in the face of this newfound family and their needs. For the first time in decades, Malik Rahim found himself on unfamiliar ground, navigating not by the stars of ambition and success, but by the long-ignored compass of family and connection. The next few days were a whirlwind for Malik. He found himself splitting his time between the gleaming offices of Rahim International and the modest apartment where Sophia and her children lived. The contrast was stark, and it forced Malik to confront the vast gulf between the life he'd built and the one he'd left behind. At work, rumors swirled about Malik's sudden absences and distracted demeanor. Victor Langley seemed to be everywhere, his concern barely masking his ambition. Malik, he cornered him after a tense meeting. The board is starting to ask questions. If there's something going on, something that could affect the company. Malik cut him off. The company is fine, Victor. Focus on the Zharkov deal. I'll handle the board. But even as he said it, Malik knew he was losing his grip on the corporate world he'd once navigated so effortlessly. His mind was elsewhere, consumed by the challenges facing his newfound family. Maya and Liam, initially wary of this stern-faced stranger who claimed to be their great-uncle, were slowly warming to Malik. He found himself looking forward to his visits, to Maya's bright chatter about her art projects and Liam's earnest questions about the business world. One evening, as Malik helped Liam with his math homework, the boy looked up at him with serious eyes. Uncle Malik, are you going to make Mom send us away, to get better? The question caught Malik off guard. Send you away? Why would you think that? Liam shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant but unable to hide the fear in his voice. That's what the doctor said, that we need to go to a special hospital, but Mom says we can't afford it. Malik felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't experienced in years. No, Liam, I'm not sending you anywhere. We're going to figure this out together, as a family. The word family felt foreign on his tongue, but not unwelcome. As he left the apartment that night, Malik found himself making a detour to a nearby park. He sat on a bench, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the Chicago skyline gold. His phone buzzed, an email from Sarah about an urgent matter at the office. For the first time in his career, Malik hesitated before responding. The empire he'd built suddenly felt hollow in comparison to the connections he was forging with Sophia and her children. As he walked back to his car, Malik passed a small Lebanese restaurant. The scent of za'atar and freshly baked bread wafted out, stirring memories he'd long suppressed. On impulse, he stepped inside. The owner, an elderly man with kind eyes, greeted him in Arabic. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome, my son. What can I get for you? Malik found himself ordering dishes he hadn't tasted in years. Tabbouleh, kibbeh, and warm pita bread. As he waited, he noticed a framed photo on the wall, a view of Beirut's coastline that could have been taken from his childhood home. Beautiful, isn't it? The owner said, following Malik's gaze. Do you know Lebanon? Malik nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I grew up there, near Beirut. The old man's face lit up. Ah, a fellow countryman. Tell me, when did you leave? Do you still have family there? The questions hit Malik like a physical blow. For a moment, he was tempted to retreat behind his usual wall of polite deflection. But something, perhaps the familiar smells, the warm smile of the owner, or the weight of the past few days, made him pause. I left 20 years ago, Malik found himself saying. And yes, I have family there. A sister. I haven't spoken to her in a long time. The old man's eyes softened with understanding. Ah, the price of chasing the American dream, eh? But it's never too late. My son. Family. Family is everything. As Malik left the restaurant, bags of food in hand and the old man's words echoing in his ears, he made a decision. It was time to make a call he'd been avoiding for far too long. The next morning, Malik stood in his penthouse, phone in hand, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The city was coming to life, but Malik's focus was on a small village thousands of miles away. With a deep breath, he dialed a number he'd ignored for years. The phone rang once, twice. Then, a familiar voice answered. Allo? Amira, Malik said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's me, it's Malik. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then, Ya Allah, Malik? Is it really you? The conversation that followed was stilted at first, years of silence creating a chasm between them. But as they talked, the barriers began to crumble. Malik listened as Amira recounted the years he'd missed, her unexpected pregnancy, the family's decision to send her away, the birth of Sophia. I tried to tell you, Amira said, her voice thick with unshed tears. So many times, Malik, but you never answered. I know, Malik replied, the weight of his choices heavy on his shoulders. I thought I was protecting myself, building a new life. I didn't realize what I was losing. As they talked, Malik found himself sharing too, about his success, yes, but also about the emptiness he'd felt, the sense that something was missing even as his wealth grew. I've met them, he told Amira. Sophia, Maya, and Liam. They're incredible, Amira. But the children are sick, and Sophia is struggling. Then they need you, Amira said simply. They need their uncle, their family. The word family resonated through Malik, stirring emotions he'd long suppressed. I want to help, he said. But I don't know how. Money, yes, but there's so much more. Amira was quiet for a moment. Then, perhaps it's time for a visit, brother. To Chicago, I mean, if you'll have me. The idea of Amira in Chicago, of bridging the gap between his past and present, was both thrilling and terrifying. But Malik found himself nodding. Yes, he said. Yes, I think it's time. As he ended the call, promising to make arrangements for Amira's visit, Malik felt a sense of lightness he hadn't experienced in years. But reality quickly intruded as his phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Emergency board meeting called. Victor Langley raising concerns about your recent behavior and absences. Meeting in 1 hour. Malik's jaw tightened. He'd known this confrontation was coming, but he'd hoped for more time. Now, he would have to face the board while his world was still shifting beneath his feet. As he prepared for the meeting, donning his armor of an impeccable suit and tie, Malik realized he was standing at a crossroads. On one side lay the empire he'd built, the success he'd sacrificed everything for. On the other, a family he was just beginning to know, a past he was just starting to reconcile. The choice he made in the next hour would define not just his future, but the legacy he would leave behind. As he stepped into the elevator, descending to the boardroom where his fate awaited, Malik Rahim knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The boardroom was silent as Malik entered, the tension palpable. Victor Langley sat at the far end of the table, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. The other board members watched Malik warily, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. "Malik," Victor began, his voice dripping with false concern. "We've called this meeting to address some concerns about your recent behavior, your unexplained absences, your distraction during crucial negotiations. The Jarkov deal is hanging by a thread, and frankly, we're worried about the future of Rahim International under your leadership." Malik felt a familiar anger rising within him, the instinct to fight back, to dominate as he had always done in the boardroom. But as he opened his mouth to speak, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished table. The face staring back at him was not the confident, ruthless businessman he'd cultivated for 2 decades. It was the face of a man torn between 2 worlds, struggling to find his place. Taking a deep breath, Malik made a decision that would alter the course of his life and his company forever. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I haven't been fully present lately, but it's not for the reasons you might think." Over the next hour, Malik did something he'd never done before in that boardroom. He told the truth. He spoke of his estranged sister, of the niece and great-niece and nephew he'd only just discovered. He talked about the children's illness, about the weight of the past he'd been carrying for years. "I've spent 2 decades building this company," Malik said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I've sacrificed everything, my heritage, my family, even parts of myself, in pursuit of success. But I've come to realize that success means nothing if you're not true to yourself, to your values." Victor scoffed. "This is all very touching, Malik, but what does it have to do with the company, with the Jarkov deal?" Malik turned to face him directly. "Everything, Victor. Because I'm proposing a change, not just in my personal life, but in how we do business." He outlined a vision for Rahim International that left the board stunned. A company that valued work-life balance, that invested in its employees, families as much as its bottom line. A company that drew strength from diversity and heritage rather than burying it. "The Jarkov deal will go through," Malik assured them. "But it will be on terms that reflect these new values, and if they don't like it, there are plenty of other opportunities out there that align with who we truly want to be as a company." The boardroom erupted into chaos. Some members voiced their support, excited by the bold new direction. Others, led by Victor, protested vehemently. But as the debate raged, Malik felt a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in years, he was being true to himself. As the meeting adjourned, no clear consensus reached but the seeds of change planted. Victor approached Malik. "This isn't over, Rahim," he hissed. "You may have won them over for now, but mark my words, this bleeding heart act will be your downfall." Malik met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps, Victor, but it's a risk I'm willing to take." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. As Malik worked to implement his new vision for Rahim International, he also threw himself into preparations for Amira's visit. He found himself spending more and more time at Sophia's apartment, helping to clean and rearrange to make space for his sister. One evening, as he helped Maya with an art project, a family tree that now included him and Amira, Liam approached him tentatively. "Uncle Malik," he said, his voice serious, "are you really going to change your whole company just because of us?" Malik paused, considering his answer carefully. "Not just because of you," he said finally, "but you, your sister, your mother. You've reminded me of what's truly important, and that's something worth changing for." The day of Amira's arrival dawned bright and clear. Malik paced the arrivals area of O'Hare International Airport, his heart racing. Sophia stood beside him, holding Maya and Liam's hands, all of them watching the gate expectantly. When Amira finally emerged, Malik felt as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. She was older, of course, her once jet-black hair now streaked with gray. But her eyes, those were exactly as he remembered. Dark and expressive, currently wide with a mixture of hope and fear. For a moment, brother and sister stood frozen, separated by just a few feet and 2 decades of silence. Then Maya, unable to contain herself any longer, broke the spell. "Grandma!" she cried, rushing forward. Liam was right behind her. Amira's face transformed, joy replacing apprehension as she knelt to embrace her grandchildren. Over their heads, her eyes met Malik's, brimming with tears. "Marhaba, Malik," she said softly. "Hello, Malik." The simple greeting, spoken in their native Arabic, cracked something inside him. Before he realized what he was doing, Malik had crossed the distance between them. He enveloped Amira in a hug, mindful of the children still clinging to her. "Ana Asif," he whispered. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate for the years of silence, the ignored pleas, the missed opportunities. But Amira's arms tightened around him, and he knew it was a start. As they drove back to the city, the car filled with chatter as Maya and Liam excitedly updated their grandmother on their lives. Malik caught Sophia's eye in the rearview mirror, saw the mixture of joy and disbelief on her face, and felt a surge of determination. This was his family, and he would do whatever it took to make things right. That evening, as they all gathered in Sophia's small apartment for a meal Ellen had prepared, Malik found himself overwhelmed by a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in decades. The scent of familiar Lebanese dishes filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and rapid-fire Arabic. Amira pulled him aside as the children cleared the table. "You've changed, brother," she said softly. Malik nodded, understanding in his eyes. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better," Amira assured him, squeezing his hand. As they rejoined the family, Malik felt a sense of peace settle over him. He was no longer running from his past or hiding behind his success. He was simply present, part of a family, part of something greater than himself. The empire he'd built still stood, but its foundations had shifted. No longer was it built on ambition alone, but on the stronger bedrock of family, love, and connection. Malik Rahim, the man who had once valued wealth above all else, was learning that the richest life is one filled with the laughter of children, the warmth of family, and the joy of rediscovered purpose. As the night wore on, filled with stories and reconnections, Malik knew that his journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, at work, with Victor's continued opposition, and at home, as they navigated the children's health issues and years of unspoken history. But for the first time in years, he looked to the future not with anxiety or ambition, but with hope and anticipation for the chapters yet to be written. The weeks following Amira's arrival were a period of adjustment for everyone. Malik found himself constantly balancing the demands of his newly restructured company with the needs of his expanding family. The Zharkov deal, once his sole focus, now shared space in his mind with Maya's art shows and Liam's debate competitions. At Rahim International, the changes Malik had proposed were beginning to take shape, but not without resistance. Victor Langley had rallied a faction of the board and several key investors who were skeptical of the new direction. Meetings often devolved into heated debates about the company's values versus its bottom line. One particularly tense morning, Malik sat in his office, poring over financial reports that showed a slight dip in quarterly profits. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called, expecting Sarah with more bad news. Instead, it was Sophia who entered, looking nervous but determined. "Uncle Malik, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Malik's face softened immediately. "Nothing more important than family. What brings you here?" Sophia hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "I've been thinking about what you said, about changing the company. I think I might be able to help." Intrigued, Malik gestured for her to continue. "Before the kids got sick, I was working on my MBA, focusing on corporate social responsibility. I've been doing some research, and I think I have some ideas that could help bridge the gap between your new vision and the board's concerns." As Sophia laid out her ideas, Malik felt a surge of pride and excitement. Here was the missing piece he'd been searching for, a way to honor his family and heritage while still driving the business forward. Over the next few days, Malik and Sophia worked tirelessly to refine the proposal. They brought in Amira, whose years of community work in Lebanon provided valuable insights. Even Maya and Liam contributed, their childish perspectives often cutting straight to the heart of complex issues. When Malik finally presented the new plan to the board, the room was silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, it was Victor who spoke first. "It's ambitious," he admitted grudgingly. "Risky, If it works, it could set a new standard for the industry. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. Rahim International would move forward with its new direction, blending profit with purpose in a way that honored Malik's rediscovered values. As the board filed out, Victor lingered. "I still think you're making a mistake, Malik," he said quietly. "But I have to admit, I'm curious to see how this plays out." Malik nodded, acknowledging the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you, Victor. I appreciate your willingness to give it a chance." That evening, as Malik shared the news with his family over a celebratory dinner, he felt a sense of completeness he'd never experienced before. Looking around the table at the faces of those he loved, Amira's proud smile, Sophia's excited chatter about next steps, Maya and Liam's exuberant joy, he knew that no business success could ever compare to this feeling. 1 year later, Malik stood at the podium of a packed auditorium, preparing to give the keynote speech at a conference on ethical business practices. In the front row, Amira, Sophia, Maya, and Liam beamed up at him, their presence a constant reminder of why he'd embarked on this new path. "A year ago," Malik began, his voice strong and clear, "I thought I had it all. Success, wealth, power. I had built an empire, but I had lost sight of what truly matters." He spoke of his journey, of rediscovering his family and his roots. He talked about the challenges of transforming Rahim International, of the setbacks and triumphs along the way. "Today, I stand before you not just as a CEO, but as a brother, an uncle, a great uncle," Malik continued. "And I can tell you with certainty that true success isn't measured in dollars or stock prices. It's measured in the lives we touch, the communities we build, and the legacy we leave behind." As he concluded his speech to thunderous applause, Malik felt a sense of peace settle over him. Rahim International was thriving under its new model, proving that profit and purpose could indeed go hand in hand. More importantly, his family was thriving too. Maya and Liam's health had improved dramatically thanks to the treatments they could now afford. Sophia had joined the company, heading up its new corporate social responsibility division. Amira split her time between Chicago and Lebanon, strengthening the family's ties to their heritage and overseeing the charitable foundation Malik had established in their parents' names. After the conference, as they all walked through a park near the venue, Malik found himself hanging back, watching his family with a sense of wonder. Maya was excitedly explaining her latest art project to Amira, while Liam peppered Sophia with questions about the speech. "Penny for your thoughts?" Sophia asked, falling into step beside him. Malik smiled, the expression now coming easily to him. "I was just thinking about legacy," he said. "A year ago, I thought my legacy would be the company, the buildings with my name on them. Now I know it's this, our family, the lives we're touching, the change we're creating." Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know, when I first came to find you, I was so angry. I thought you were this heartless tycoon who had abandoned his family. I never imagined that I was just a lost man who needed to find his way home," Malik finished for her. "Exactly," Sophia laughed. "I'm glad we found each other, Uncle Malik, all of us." As they rejoined the others, Maya tugging on Malik's hand to show him a flower she'd found, Liam launching into a debate about the ethics of AI that he wanted his great-uncle's opinion on, Malik felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The empire he had built still stood, but it was no longer a cold, lonely pinnacle. Instead, it had become a foundation for a life rich in love, purpose, and connection. Malik Rahim, once the solitary king of his corporate castle, had found that true wealth lay not in boardrooms and balance sheets, but in the warm embrace of family and the joy of a life lived with meaning. As the Chicago sun set behind them, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Malik knew that the greatest chapters of his life were still to come, and this time, he would write them not alone, but surrounded by the love and strength of the family he had rediscovered. What did you think of Malik's story? Leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it, one to subscribe if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.